want you to do something might be a little bit difficult. I want you to learn to love complaints. I watched a speech by the Victorian Ombudsman. The Ombudsman's role is to take complaints about the public sector. Her advice was learn to love your complaints. She said sometimes the way that the agency receiving the complaint deals with it actually becomes the subject of the complaint itself. Let me tell you a story. Years ago now, when I was at the EPA, there was a community issue that had been simmering away. The community thought that there was a big health hazard, and they had been shouting about it for years. They'd organized a big community group, and we'd ignored them for years. A new CEO goes out and he starts listening. And for months, all he's hearing is shouting. But eventually, they get it out of their system a bit, and he's still there, still listening. And so they started working on, well, what are we going to do to answer this question of, is there a risk from this thing? Fast forward, they go and do a huge, big analysis, studies, scientists. Eventually, this report comes back and says, no, there is no risk. And guess what? The person who was the head of the community group, who had been the most angry, the most vociferous, the one shouting and screaming and no trust for years, she stood up in front of her own community and said, this report says there's not an issue. I believe them. Now let's talk about what we do next together. Total 180. And it started with our then CEO loving the complaint, trusting that the person who was complaining knew what they were talking about. Not necessarily that they were right, but that they had grounds. And he honored that, and he built up trust from that point. So love those complaints, love those complainants. They are a gift waiting to help you get where you're trying to get to through your work.